I want to clear a very common misconception about job hopping. It's a bit of an unkindly term describing those who change their job a little bit too often. And people who change their jobs a few times, a lot of them have this fear in the back of their mind that, did I just commit a career suicide? Will the recruiters just tag me as job hopper and trash my CV? Well, in my personal experience as a recruiter, I actually managed to place quite a few people who are kind of job hoppers by that definition, but they had very good reasons for moving or changing jobs to sort of more often than they wanted to. On the other hand, there were indeed job hoppers who could not offer good reasons, and they seemed to be leaving every 3-4 months, which is too short usually, and also they seemed to be leaving without knowing what they were going after, without knowing what next steps could be, without a very strong reason in that sense. So you see, what differentiates a good job hopper and a bad job hopper is actually the logic in the story. If the logic in the story is in such a way that when you, the recruiter or the hiring manager, get to put in the same situation and has the same personality as the person and has the same desire at that point of time, he or she would make exactly the same choice. And that is logical. So I give you an example. This logic is also something in story writing that we often look for. So I do, in the other part of my life, I write fiction, and I study how to write a good story. And a good story is about describing a character who is of certain personality, who has a certain desire, and when a certain situation arises, he or she would make a certain decision. And if that decision is logical, the story becomes real and relatable. Similarly, you can definitely apply exactly the same technique to look at personality trait, which means who you are or who you were at that point of time, what you wanted, and what the situation was. Among the 3 elements, who you were at that point of time, what you desired, and what the situation was, you should focus on who you were, because that's the element that's the most likely going to last through your entire career history till today and into the future. And this is the single important thing that your potential employer is looking at, because when you tell them your life story, they actually derive who you are, what kind of person you are. And that piece combined with what you wanted, that kind of is also important, but the desire is less important, because what you wanted at that point of time would not be what you want today. This thing constantly evolves, right? For example, when I was a junior engineer, software engineer, my desire was actually to become I didn't know what, but something into the business domain, some kind of work that has this customer-facing element. And this part of desire is not so important, because later when I move on, when I was in business domain, I didn't want the same thing anymore. But what was important is I, being who I was, did not take no for an answer. Although everyone else was saying, it's impossible for a software engineer with 2 years experience to go into a sales role or project management. But I didn't believe it. So I think that spirit of not taking no for an answer and constantly finding ways to change for the better is actually something that also shows up in my future moves. And that is something that we can identify as a key personality trait that would also benefit, most likely, my future career. And this is definitely a message I wanted to build into my entire story, right? And when it comes to situation, it's really not important, and we should leave it out as much as possible, because what's the point of talking about why that company couldn't offer me a lot of opportunities to move, why I actually didn't want to stay in that company for other reasons as well. It's just distracting, and usually they are in a very negative note. So focus on who you were and who you still are and what you wanted. I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes from a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Percy. I might be pronouncing his name wrongly, sorry if so. Anyway, he says, you look where you are going and where you are, and it never makes sense. But then you look back at where you've been and the pattern starts to emerge. And this pattern is exactly what we want to demonstrate through telling our life stories to the prospective employers. And for example, if every particular decision point we were able to tell a good logic, now it's time that we need to chain it together. It's like you have pearls, and then you want to make it into a beautiful necklace or jewelry, then there needs to be some form of consistency or pattern. It could be color, it could be pattern or texture, it could be sizes from bigger to smaller or smaller to bigger, or etc. There needs to be a pattern to make this thing as an entirety that is making sense. And if you do that right, and you are able to bring out the identifiable pattern and bring that message across to your prospective employer, then congratulations, you belong to that good job hopper, not the bad ones. And being a good job hopper brings many benefits, because although you may lack in a bit of a depth in certain domain comparing to those who stay in the same domain for a long time, you do accumulate other knowledge. For all the industries that you have worked with, all the functions that you have worked in, they deepen your knowledge in industries and in business in general, and in how things function. You work with different cultures and different people. All these are very intangible assets that you could bring to your future employer. But do you want to do this thing like just putting everything in this mixed bag and offer it as is? Obviously, you don't want to, because if the employer is looking for sales, then even if I had 8 years in HR, I had a number of years in maybe say content or marketing, it's not going to help a lot. I should be better off if I focus on my sales experience and touch a bit on my sales element of my other jobs. Of course, do note that for whatever that's transferable, we want to bring that across as well. So if they are looking for someone to start up that sales team, then my startup experience could help. Maybe I have started a company, maybe I had worked in a startup team in a big corporate, and all those can be very important points. And this brings me into a new territory, because till now we have been talking about understanding ourselves. But this is talking about understanding what the employer wants. To do that, there are a number of things which I will cover in another video.